A young planter brings his kitchen girl to a grand riverfront party, planning nothing but cruel sport. Crystal chandeliers throw light across silk gowns, while whispers follow the small figure in her simple dress. But when the hostess collapses, gasping for breath, those same whispers turn to stunned silence as the girl kneels down and begins to hum. Latin words flow from her lips, a fevered pulse steadies under her touch. The room falls under a spell no one expected. Then the patrollers arrive. Papers are demanded. Seals are questioned. A blue ribbon trembles in lamplight while dogs howl in the distance, and a courthouse bell tolls the midnight hour. Hidden in the folds of an old quilt lies a secret, sown with desperate hope, but will the signet ring in the doctor's dusty jar prove the salvation everyone seeks? When dawn breaks over the courthouse steps and the whole county gathers to hear the truth spoken aloud, will justice triumph, or will the joke become a tragedy no one can undo? The kitchen smelled of ash and yesterday's bread. Lark stood by the brick hearth, her bare feet quiet on the worn boards. Steam rose from the big kettle. The blue ribbon lay on the wooden peg where Aunt Ruth had hung it the night before. Thomas Bellamy paced near the door. His boots clicked against the floor. Click, turn, click. His face looked grey in the dawn light coming through the window. "I'll take her," he said, "to Harrow's Gala tonight." Aunt Ruth stopped stirring the porridge. The wooden spoon dripped once, twice. "Master Thomas, that's a foolish thing." "Foolish?" Thomas laughed, but it sounded bitter. "Harrow wants to play games. Fine. I'll bring my kitchen girl to his grand party. See how his guests like that jest." Moses Reed sat at the scarred table, his old hands wrapped around a tin cup. Steam curled from his coffee. "Patroller's going to ask for papers." "I have papers." Thomas pulled a folded document from his coat. The wax seal caught the firelight. "Travel chit. Old, but it'll do." Lark watched the men talk. Her chest felt tight, like when the summer storms pressed down before the rain came. The blue ribbon hung still and straight on its peg. "Girl don't need to go nowhere near that place," Aunt Ruth said. She set down the spoon and turned to face Thomas. "Bad things happen when folks start playing with people like toys." Thomas stopped pacing. His eyes found Lark. "Well, girl, cat got your tongue?" Lark looked at the ribbon. It was the color of morning sky, before the sun burned it white. She thought of the hymn Moses had taught her, the one about doors and windows and safe places. "I'll go if you say to go, Master Thomas." Moses stood slowly. His chair creaked. He walked to the peg and lifted down the ribbon. His fingers were gentle when he placed it in Lark's palm. "If you must go, girl, go under God," he whispered. "Tie that ribbon tight. And remember what I taught you about the hymn. Door 3, red wax, desk by the 5, window." Lark's fingers closed around the ribbon. The cloth felt warm. She thought of what Aunt Ruth always said. "Lord sees everything, child." Everything. Thomas opened the kitchen door. Grey light spilled in, cold and thin. "Ready the wagon, Moses. We leave at dusk." The wagon wheels bumped over ruts in the road. Lark sat between Thomas and Moses on the hard wooden seat. Her hands rested in her lap, the blue ribbon knotted around her wrist like Aunt Ruth had shown her. Pine trees pressed close on both sides of the track. Their tops swayed against the purple sky. A mockingbird called from somewhere high up, then fell silent. Moses clicked his tongue at the old mule. "Easy, Sarah girl." Long road ahead. They passed the first torch post. A man in a wide hat stepped out from behind a tree. His badge caught the torchlight. "Hold there." Thomas pulled the reins. The wagon creaked to a stop. Evening. The patroller walked around to Thomas's side. His boots crunched on the pine needles scattered in the road. "Where you headed?" "Harrow Place." "Got an invitation?" Thomas kept his voice level. "Let me see your travel papers." Thomas reached into his coat and pulled out the folded document. The patroller held it close to the torch. His lips moved as he read. "This here's old. From 2 years back. Still good. Ain't expired." The patroller looked at Lark. His eyes were pale in the torchlight. "This your girl?" "She is. Better have her back before dawn. Curfew's strict around the ferry." The man folded the paper and handed it back. "Roads ain't safe after midnight." Thomas tucked the document away. "We'll be careful." The patroller stepped back. Moses clucked to the mule. The wagon rolled forward. When they were past the next bend, Lark began to hum. The notes came soft and low, a tune Moses had taught her in the kitchen while they shelled peas. The mule's ears twitched, her pace evened out. "Good girl," Moses whispered. "Music keeps the fear away." Thomas said nothing, but Lark saw his shoulders loosen just a little. The road stretched ahead, marked by torch posts every quarter mile. Between the pools of light lay dark patches where the trees grew thick. In those shadows, anything might wait. Lark hummed the first 4 bars of the hymn again. The melody stayed true, each note clear in the cooling air. Her perfect pitch held steady, like Aunt Ruth's voice when she prayed. Sarah the mule found her rhythm. Her hooves beat time on the packed earth. 1-2, 1-2. The ferry waited at the river's edge, lantern light dancing on the dark water. Fog clung to the cypress trees that stood knee-deep in the shallows. The ferry bell knocked twice as Moses guided the wagon down the muddy slope. "Hello, the raft," called the ferryman. 2 other passengers huddled near the far rail, strangers wrapped in damp coats. One lifted his head as Thomas climbed down from the wagon. "Evening," the stranger said. Something silver glinted on his chest. Thomas nodded, crossing to the Harrow landing. The ferryman took the mule's bridle. "Load up quick." Rivers running high from the rains upriver. Moses helped Lark down from the wagon. Her feet touched the wet planks of the ferry. The wood felt spongy under her bare soles. She kept her eyes down, like Aunt Ruth had taught her, but she listened. "You're Bellamy," said the stranger with the badge. "From down Millfield Way." "I am. Heard you got troubles. Debts and such." Thomas's voice stayed level. "Man's troubles are his own," the stranger chuckled. "True enough. Name's Pike. Asa Pike. I patrol this county." Lark glanced up just long enough to see Pike's badge in the lantern light. The county seal showed a fleur-de-lis with a curled tail, but something looked wrong. The tail curved too sharp, like a pen had slipped. "You got papers for the girl?" Pike asked. "I do." "Gala invitation too?" "From Silas Harrow himself." Thomas pulled out a cream-colored card. "You can read it if you want." Pike waved the card away. "No need. Just checking. Lot of runaways this time of year. Harvest season makes folks restless." The ferry shuddered as the current caught it. The ferryman leaned into his pole, muscles straining. On the far bank, music drifted through the fog, violin and piano, sweet and high. Lark tucked her chin down and thought about what she'd seen. Seals could lie. The thought came clear and cold, like well water in summer. "There's Harrow House," Pike said, pointing through the mist. Light spilled from tall windows across the dark water. The music grew louder. Laughter carried on the night air. The ferry bumped against the landing. Thomas took Lark's hand to help her onto the wooden dock. "Enjoy your party," Pike called after them, but his voice didn't sound friendly anymore. Harrow House blazed with light. Every window glowed yellow against the night. Carriages lined the curved drive. Ladies in silk dresses stepped carefully up the front steps, their skirts rustling like leaves. Thomas straightened his shoulders. His best coat looked shabby next to the fine clothes around them, but he held his head high. "Remember," he whispered to Lark, "stay quiet, stay close." The front door stood open. Music floated out, violin, piano, and the low murmur of conversation. A servant in white gloves took Thomas's hat. "Master Bellamy," the servant said. "Master Harrow is in the ballroom." They walked down a hall lined with oil paintings. Rich carpet muffled their footsteps. Lark had never seen such luxury. Crystal glasses tinkled like tiny bells from the room ahead. The ballroom doorway opened before them. Light poured out, not yellow like candles, but white and brilliant. A chandelier hung from the high ceiling, its crystals throwing rainbows on the walls. Thomas stepped into the doorway. Silas. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Lark felt the weight of watching eyes. Silas Harrow stood near the fireplace, a wineglass in his hand. He was younger than Thomas, with dark hair combed sleek. His smile looked sharp. "Thomas Bellamy, you came." "I did, and you brought." Harrow's eyes found Lark. "Company." A woman with grey hair and kind eyes stood beside Harrow. Her dress was deep blue silk. Pearls circled her throat like white stars. "Mama," Harrow said, "allow me to present Thomas Bellamy, and his kitchen girl." The woman, Eugenia Harrow, smiled at Lark. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. "What's your name, child?" "Lark, ma'am." "Pretty name." Eugenia's voice was soft. Like the bird that sings at dawn. Musicians sat in the corner, two men with violins, a woman at a small piano. They had stopped playing when Thomas entered. Now they began again, but the melody stuttered. Guests whispered behind their fans. Some laughed behind their hands. Lark felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her face still. The chandelier light fell across her face like water. She looked up at the high windows, where moths beat their wings against the glass. Outside, fog pressed against the panes. "Well," Harrow said, raising his glass. "To unexpected guests." The room tittered. Someone in the back called out, "Quite the jest, Thomas." But Eugenia Harrow didn't laugh. She watched Lark with gentle eyes. Her hand went to her throat, where the pearls lay against her pale skin. The violinist missed a note, then another. His bow wavered. Eugenia swayed. Just a little, like a tree before the wind catches it full. Eugenia's hand went to her throat. Her pearls caught the chandelier light. The color drained from her cheeks. "Mama?" Harrow set down his wineglass. Eugenia took a step backward. Her knees buckled. She would have fallen, but Lark was already moving. The girl slipped between the guests like water. Her bare feet made no sound on the carpet. She reached Eugenia just as the woman's legs gave way. "Easy, ma'am. I got you." Lark helped Eugenia to a chair by the window. The guests pressed close, but Lark paid them no mind. She knelt beside the chair and took Eugenia's wrist in her small hands. "Breathe with me, ma'am. Slow and steady." Eugenia's pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. Her breathing came quick and shallow. Lark closed her eyes and remembered Dr. Leclerc's back room, where she dusted shelves and read labels while he worked. "Spear, menthe," she whispered. "Tinct, opie. 2 drops in water." She began to hum, not loud, just a thread of melody. The same hymn Moses had taught her, but softer now. The rhythm matched a steady heartbeat. Eugenia's breathing began to match the tempo. In and out, in and out. Her color returned, pink, touching her cheeks. The room had gone silent. Every guest watched the small girl sing an old woman back to steadiness. "Who taught you Latin, child?" Dr. Leclerc stood in the doorway, his black bag in his hand. His white hair was damp from the fog outside. He must have come late to the party. "Nobody, sir. I just remembered the bottles in your back room, when you let me dust the shelves." Leclerc knelt beside Lark. He felt Eugenia's pulse, looked into her eyes. "How do you feel, Eugenia?" "Better. Much better." Eugenia smiled at Lark. "This child has healing hands." "Indeed she does." Leclerc's eyes were thoughtful. "That spirit of mint you prescribed, and tincture of opium. Exactly right for a heart spell." Rain began to hiss against the tall windows. The sound was soft at first, then grew stronger. Everyone in the ballroom seemed to lean closer, as if Lark's quiet voice had drawn them into a spell. "My stars," whispered a woman in green silk. "How does a kitchen girl know doctoring?" Lark didn't answer. She kept humming, keeping time with Eugenia's steady breathing. The blue ribbon on her wrist caught the light. Outside, the rain grew heavier. It drummed on the roof and ran down the windows like tears. "Papers." The voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. Asa Pike stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hat. Water pooled on the fine carpet under his boots. "Master Pike," Harrow said, "you're dripping on my Persian rug. Sorry about that." Pike stepped forward anyway. His pale eyes found Lark. "Need to see papers for the girl. Protocol." Thomas reached into his coat. "I have papers. Not yours, hers." A man stepped from behind Pike. Thin face, narrow shoulders, clothes that looked too new. He held a folded document in his hand. "Jasper Crowell," the man said with a bow. "County clerk. I'm afraid there's been an irregularity." Harrow frowned. "What kind of irregularity?" "This girl," Crowell pointed at Lark. "She's been attending a social gathering without proper documentation. The law requires specific papers for such occasions." He unfolded the document in his hand. "Fortunately, I have the proper form right here. Fresh from the courthouse." Lark looked at the paper. The wax seal gleamed red in the chandelier light. But something was wrong. The fleur-de-lis looked different from the one on Pike's badge. The tail curled the other way. "May I see that, sir?" she asked. Crowell jerked the paper back. "Children don't read legal documents." "This child reads Latin," Dr. Leclerc said quietly. I'd say she can manage English. Pike's hand moved toward his belt. Girl needs to come with us. For questioning. But Eugenia Harrow stood up from her chair. Her voice was clear and strong. This child just saved my life. She stays right here. Ma'am, with respect. No. Eugenia's chin lifted. I won't have her taken. Not tonight. The rain hammered harder against the windows. Lightning flickered in the distance. The ballroom felt smaller somehow, as if the storm was pressing the walls closer together. Lark looked around the room. Every face watched her some kind, some worried, some hard with suspicion. The blue ribbon tight on her wrist felt warm against her skin. Thomas stepped beside her. The girl goes where I go. Not anymore, she don't, Pike said. Crowell here says the courthouse wants her first thing in the morning. Debt inspection. Thomas went very still. What debt inspection? Your creditors moved up their meeting, Crowell said with a thin smile. Dawn, tomorrow. They want to review all your assets. Lightning flashed again, brighter this time. Thunder followed like a giant's footstep. Lark thought about seals and wax and papers that told lies. She thought about the hymn Moses had taught her and the words he'd whispered. Door 3, red wax, desk by the window. The storm was coming. But maybe, if she listened close enough to the music hidden in the thunder, she could find the doors that led to safety. Outside, the wind began to howl. The courthouse bell struck midnight. Thomas stood at the Harrow House window, watching rain slash across the glass. Lark sat in a chair nearby, the blue ribbon wound tight around her fingers. They mean to take her, Thomas said without turning around. Dr. Leclerc set down his teacup. Pike's been sniffing around looking for trouble. That Clark Crowell has been helping him. Helping him do what? Make papers disappear, make new ones appear. There's money in it, if you're not particular about the law. Eugenia leaned forward in her chair. You think they forged that document? I know they did, Lark said quietly. The wax was wrong. The seal tail curved backward. Leclerc raised an eyebrow. You noticed that? Yes, sir. In the lantern light on the ferry, Pike's badge showed the fleur-de-lis tail, curling one way. Master Crowell's paper had it curling the other. Thomas turned from the window. You're certain? Yes, sir. Perfect pitch for music, works for seeing things too. Details have to match, or the song goes wrong. A door opened across the room. Moses entered, shaking rain from his hat. Behind him came a tall man in plain brown clothes. Master Thomas, Moses said. This here's Elias Quimby. He's got something to say. Quimby stepped forward. His face was weathered like old leather, but his eyes were clear. I'm a Quaker, Mr. Bellamy. I believe in bearing witness to truth. What truth is that? The truth about your debts, and about certain papers that Pike and Crowell have been passing around. Lark stood up from her chair. The hymn, Moses, the one you taught me. It has directions, doesn't it? Moses nodded slowly. Door 3, red wax, desk by the window. That's not just words, child. That's a map. Map to what? The real ledger. The one that shows how Pike and Crowell been working together. How they've been changing debt papers and taking money for themselves. Thunder crashed overhead. The storm was moving closer. I'll need proof, Thomas said. We'll find it, Quimby said. But we'll need the child to help. She's got the key. Lark touched the blue ribbon on her wrist. What kind of key? Moses smiled. The kind that sings, little bird. The kind that opens doors when the music is true. They left Harrow House through the kitchen door. Rain pelted the small group as they hurried toward the stable. Moses carried a lantern that swayed with each step, throwing wild shadows on the ground. Where exactly are we going? Thomas asked, pulling his coat tight. The courthouse, Quimby said, but not the front door. There's a side entrance that leads to the records room. That'll be locked. Not if you know which window latch is loose. Lark walked between Moses and Thomas, her feet splashing through puddles. The blue ribbon stayed knotted on her wrist, but she had tucked the loose end into her sleeve to keep it safe. They reached the stable. Inside, 3 horses stamped and snorted in their stalls. Moses saddled 2 quickly, while Quimby helped Lark onto a gentle mare. You sure about this, child? Quimby asked. It's dangerous work we're about, I'm sure. Lark gathered the reins. The hymn has been singing in my head all night. It wants to be followed. They rode out into the storm. Lightning split the sky every few minutes, showing the road in stark white glimpses. The horses' hooves splashed through standing water. The courthouse sat on a low hill, its white columns glowing in the lightning flashes. Dark windows stared down at them like empty eyes. There, Quimby pointed to a window on the side of the building. Records room. They dismounted and tied the horses to a fence post. Moses lifted Lark down from her mare. Her feet hit the muddy ground with a soft squelch. "The window latch is rusty," Quimby whispered, "but it'll give if you work it right." Thomas worked at the latch while the others huddled close. Metal grated against metal. Then click. The window swung open. "Lark goes first," Moses said. "She's smallest." Lark climbed through the window into darkness. Her feet found the floor. The room smelled of old paper and dust. "Light the lantern," she whispered. Moses passed the lantern through the window. Lark lit it with the flint and steel from her pocket. Warm light filled the room. Shelves lined every wall, packed with ledgers and bound papers. A large desk sat by the window, exactly where Moses had said it would be. "Door 3, red wax, desk by the window," Lark whispered. She began to hum the hymn softly. The melody guided her eyes around the room, past the first shelf, past the second, to a third set of shelves near the back wall. A small door was set between the bookcases, painted red. "There," she said. Behind the red door lay a narrow closet filled with more ledgers. But these were different, bound in brown leather, unmarked. Lark ran her fingers along the spines until she found one that felt different from the rest. The leather was worn smooth, like many hands had touched it. "This one," she said. Thomas and Quimby crowded behind her as she opened the ledger. Pages of neat handwriting filled the book. Names, dates, amounts of money. "It's a record of debts," Thomas said, "but not the official one." Quimby pointed to an entry halfway down the page. "Look there. Your name, Thomas. But the amount is different." Thomas bent closer. "That's not what I owe. That's twice what I owe." "Keep reading." Further down the page, another entry. A. Pike, 50%. J. Crowell, 25%. S. Harrow, 25%. "They've been splitting the extra money," Thomas said. His voice was tight with anger. "Pike and Crowell have been adding false debts and keeping half the money for themselves." Lark turned the page. More names, more false debts. But at the bottom of the page, a different kind of entry caught her eye. "Girl, kitchen, age, 11, special sale pending, buyer arranged." Her blood went cold. "They were planning to sell me." Moses put his hand on her shoulder. "Not anymore, child. Not with this proof." Thunder boomed overhead. The storm was getting worse. "We need a witness," Quimby said. "Someone who can swear to what we've found." "Who would believe us?" Thomas asked. "Dr. Leclerc," Lark said. "He's respected, and he was there when I helped Mrs. Harrow. Can you find him?" Lark closed her eyes and listened to the hymn in her head. The melody was changing, growing more complex. New verses were coming, pointing to new directions. "The doctor's house," she said. "Near the river. The melody says to follow the water." They climbed back out through the window, taking the ledger with them. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, but lightning still flickered in the distance. As they mounted their horses, Lark heard something that made her go still. Dogs barking. Coming closer. "Pike's found us," Moses said grimly. "Then we ride hard," Quimby said, "and we pray the Lord keeps us ahead of them." They spurred their horses toward the river, the stolen ledger tucked safely inside Thomas's coat. "Doctor." Leclerc's house sat beside the river like a patient heron. Light showed in one downstairs window. As they rode up the muddy path, the front door opened. "I saw your lanterns," Leclerc said. "Trouble following you?" "Pike's on our trail," Thomas said, dismounting quickly. "We found something." They hurried inside. Leclerc's wife, a small woman with grey hair, appeared in her nightgown. "Coffee's still warm," she said. "You all look half drowned." In the warm kitchen, Thomas spread the ledger on the wooden table. Leclerc studied the pages while his wife poured steaming coffee into thick mugs. "This is evidence of fraud," Leclerc said finally, clear as day. "Will you witness it?" Quimby asked. "I will, but you need more than one witness, and you need somewhere safe to keep the ledger until morning." A sound made them all freeze. Horses' hooves on the muddy road outside. Back door, Leclerc's wife whispered, but it was too late. A fist pounded on the front door. Open up, County Patrol. Leclerc looked at Lark. Is there somewhere you can hide? Lark closed her eyes and listened to the hymn. A new verse came to her, soft and clear. The cellar, under the stairs. But first the ledger goes somewhere else. She grabbed the book and ran to the fireplace. Above the mantel hung a wooden frame holding pressed flowers. She lifted it down, revealing a small cavity in the wall. How did you know? Leclerc asked. The hymn, Lark said, sliding the ledger into the hiding space. It shows safe places. The pounding came again, louder. Coming, Leclerc called. He replaced the frame and nodded to Lark. Go. Lark slipped under the stairs just as Leclerc opened the front door. Evening, Asa, Leclerc said calmly. Bit late for visiting, isn't it? Looking for some folks. Pike's voice was harsh. Thomas Bellamy and his girl. They steal something from the courthouse. Haven't seen them, Leclerc lied smoothly. Been tending a fevered child all night. The Dilling baby. Touch and go, it was. From her hiding place, Lark could see Pike's boots in the doorway. They were caked with mud. Mind if I look around? I do mind. Got a sick baby upstairs. Your stomping around won't help her any. Pike hesitated. If you're lying, I'm not. Check with Dilling tomorrow if you want. The baby's fever broke just an hour ago, thanks be to God. The boots stepped backward. We'll be watching, Doc. You and everyone else. The door closed. Hoofbeats faded into the distance. Lark crawled out from under the stairs. The baby, she said. Is there really a sick baby? Leclerc smiled. There is, and her fever did break. Sometimes the truth serves better than lies. But we can't stay here, Thomas said. Pike will be back. Quimby stood up. I know a place. Safe harbor, you might say. Lark touched the blue ribbon on her wrist. The hymn in her head was growing stronger, pointing toward morning, toward answers that waited with the dawn. The Quaker meeting house stood in a grove of oak trees, its plain walls grey in the pre-dawn light. Quimby led them through a side door into a simple room lined with wooden benches. We'll be safe here until sunrise, he said. Then we take what we've learned to the courthouse. Lark sat on one of the benches, her legs tucked under her. The blue ribbon felt loose on her wrist now, as if it knew the long night was almost over. Thomas paced by the window, watching the road. What if Pike gets there first? Thomas asked. What if he destroys the evidence? He won't, Lark said quietly. The hymn says there's more. The ledger was just the first door. Moses settled beside her on the bench. What else does the hymn tell you, child? Lark closed her eyes and listened to the melody that had been growing in her heart all night. New verses came to her, clear and strong. A quilt, she said, hidden in the church basement, a manumission paper sewn into the binding, and a ring, a signet ring that matches the real seal. Quimby leaned forward. Whose ring? I don't know yet, but the hymn says it's been waiting. In a jar marked unclaimed things. On a shelf in the doctor's back room. Leclerc's back room? Yes, sir. Thomas stopped pacing. You think there's a legal manumission for you? Already written? I think someone planned for this day a long time ago. Someone who knew that lies can only stand so long before the truth catches up. Outside, the sky was lightening. Grey clouds hung low, but the storm was moving off toward the mountains. Birds began to sing in the oak trees. We need to get that ring, Quimby said, and find this quilt. I know where the quilt is, said a new voice. They turned. In the doorway stood a woman in a worn dress and a faded shawl. Her hair was white as cotton, her dark skin lined with years. Aunt Ruth, Lark breathed. Followed your trail all night, child. You and that hymn of yours been leading folks all over the county. Ruth stepped into the meeting house. The quilt's in the Baptist church basement. Been there since before you were born, waiting for the right time. Thomas frowned. How do you know about any of this? Ruth smiled. Because I'm the one who sewed that manumission clause into the binding. Took me 6 months of tiny stitches, working by candlelight when the master was asleep. But why? Because your grandfather, Thomas Bellamy, wasn't the hard man you think he was. He made provision for Lark's freedom before he died. Legal provision. But the papers got lost in all the confusion after he passed. Lark stood up slowly. So the manumission is real? Real as sunrise, child. But it needs two things to be legal: the old signet ring with the right wax seal, and a witness who can read the clause aloud. I can be the witness, Quimby said. Ruth nodded. Then let's go dig up the truth. Dawn's coming, and Pike won't wait much longer. They left the meeting house together, 5 people following a hymn toward the promise of freedom. The Baptist church sat on a hill overlooking the river. Its white steeple pointed toward the clearing sky like a finger raised in prayer. They entered through the back door, Ruth leading the way with a key she pulled from her pocket. How do you have a key? Thomas asked. Been cleaning this church for 20 years, Ruth said. Nobody thinks to question an old woman with a mop. The basement smelled of damp stone and old wood. Boxes and trunks lined the walls, filled with donated quilts and clothes for the poor. Ruth went straight to a corner where a large trunk sat beneath a window. Help me with this, she said. Thomas and Quimby lifted the heavy lid. Inside lay quilts of every color and pattern, but Ruth pushed aside the bright ones and reached for a plain gray quilt at the bottom. This one, she said. Looks like nothing special, doesn't it? She spread the quilt on the floor. It was indeed plain gray patches sewn together with simple stitches, but along one edge the binding looked thicker than the rest. Ruth pulled a small knife from her pocket and began to work at the stitches. Took me months to hide this so nobody would find it, but I made sure somebody could get it out when the time came. The binding opened. Inside lay a folded piece of paper, brown with age. Read it, Ruth said, handing the paper to Quimby. Quimby unfolded it carefully. His voice was steady as he read. Be it known that the girl child called Lark, born in the year of our Lord 1847, shall be granted her freedom on her 12th birthday, provided the bearer of this document can produce the family signet ring and press it to wax of the clerk's red seal. Lark's breath caught. My 12th birthday is tomorrow. That's right, child? December 1st. Your grandfather planned it that way. Thomas stared at the document. But the ring is in Dr. Leclerc's back room, Lark said. The hymn has been pointing us there all along. Footsteps echoed in the church above them. Heavy boots on wooden floors. They found us, Moses whispered. Ruth folded the manumission paper quickly. You take this, she said to Lark. Keep it safe. I'll deal with whoever's upstairs. But it was too late. Boot steps on the basement stairs. Pike appeared in the doorway, his hand on his pistol. Well, he said. Look what we got here. Runaway slaves and their helpers, stealing from a church. We're not stealing anything, Quimby said calmly. We're recovering legal documents. Legal. Pike laughed. Ain't nothing legal about slaves reading papers in a basement. Behind Pike, Jasper Crowell appeared, his thin face twisted with greed. Where's the ledger, Bellamy? We know you took it. What ledger? Thomas asked. Crowell pulled out a folded paper. This here's a warrant for the arrest of you and the girl. Theft of county property. Lark looked at the paper in Crowell's hand. The wax seal gleamed red in the lamplight, but even from across the room, she could see the fleur-de-lis tail curled the wrong way. That's a forgery, she said quietly. Pike's eyes narrowed. You calling me a liar, girl? I'm calling that paper a fake. The seal's wrong. Prove it. Lark stepped forward. Her voice was clear and strong. The real county seal has a fleur-de-lis with a tail that curls to the right. Your seal has the tail curling to the left. Someone made a mistake when they carved the false die. Pike's hand tightened on his pistol. Smart girls don't live long around here. But from upstairs came the sound of many voices. Footsteps, calling, the creak of the church door. Search party, Moses said with a grin. Looks like half the county's looking for you, Pike. Dawn light streamed through the basement window. The long night was over, but the hardest test was just beginning. Dr. Leclerc appeared at the top of the basement stairs, followed by a crowd of townspeople. Lantern light flickered on worried faces. Pike whirled around, his pistol half drawn. Easy there. Sir, Leclerc said calmly. Lot of folks been looking for you. Got questions about some missing courthouse documents. I'm conducting official business, Pike snarled. With forged warrants? Leclerc descended the stairs slowly. Funny thing about wax seals. Hard to copy them exactly right. Behind the doctor came Eugenia Harrow, her shawl pulled tight against the morning chill. Her eyes found Lark immediately. Child, are you hurt? No, ma'am. Good, Eugenia's voice was firm. Because I owe you my life, and I intend to see you get justice. Crowell waved his paper. This is a legal warrant. Let me see that. A new voice spoke from the top of the stairs. Judge Whitcomb descended slowly, his white hair catching the lantern light. He wore his nightclothes under his coat, hastily dressed. Crowell handed over the warrant reluctantly. Judge Whitcomb studied it carefully, then looked at Pike. Asa, where did you get this? Courthouse. Official business. Funny. I was at the courthouse last night. Locked up myself around 10 o'clock. This paper wasn't signed then. Pike's face went pale. Must have been earlier. No. The judge's voice was steel. Because I'm the only one who signs warrants in this county, and I didn't sign this one. He held the paper to the light. Poor forgery, too. Whoever carved this seal made the fleur-de-lis tail curl the wrong way. Lark felt the blue ribbon tighten on her wrist, as if the truth was pulling everything together at last. There's more, she said quietly. Papers hidden in the courthouse. A ledger that shows how money's been stolen. Pike's hand moved toward his pistol again, but Thomas stepped between him and Lark. You want to draw on a child, Pike? In front of all these witnesses. The crowd pressed closer. Faces that had seemed strange and distant in the ballroom now looked like neighbors, people who cared about right and wrong. The ring, Lark whispered to Leclerc. In your back room. A jar marked unclaimed things. Can you fetch it? Leclerc nodded. Stay here, all of you. I'll be back. As the doctor hurried up the stairs, Lark felt the hymn singing stronger in her heart. The melody pointed toward something bright and final, like sunrise after the longest night. But Pike wasn't finished. His pale eyes glittered with desperation. None of this matters, he said. Girl's still a slave. Paper or no paper, she belongs to Bellamy until he says different. Actually, said Judge Whitcomb, I'd like to see the documents these folks have been talking about. All of them, Ruth stepped forward. I got one right here, Your Honor. She unfolded the manumission paper from the quilt binding. The judge took it gently, his old hands careful with the brittle parchment. Well, well, he murmured. This is quite interesting. Judge Whitcomb read the manumission paper slowly, his lips moving with the words. The basement had gone quiet, except for the sound of rain beginning again, outside a gentle pattering on the church windows. This appears to be genuine, the judge said finally, signed by Marcus Bellamy in 1847. But it requires two conditions to be valid. The ring and the wax, Lark said. Yes, sir. You know about those requirements. The hymn taught me. It's been teaching me all night. Pike spat on the stone floor. Hymns don't teach nothing, just slave nonsense. But Eugenia Harrow stepped closer. I heard this child's hymn last night. When I was dying, it called me back. There's power in it. Dr. Leclerc returned, breathing hard from running. In his hand he carried a small glass jar. Inside, something glinted gold. Found it, he said, right where you said it would be. He unscrewed the jar's lid and pulled out a signet ring. The gold was tarnished, but the carved seal was clear, a fleur-de-lis with its tail curling to the right. Judge Whitcomb took the ring and examined it carefully. This is the Bellamy family seal. I remember Marcus wearing it. But how do we know it fits the clerk's red wax? Thomas asked. Crowell backed toward the stairs. This is all nonsense. Old papers, old rings. Hold there, Jasper, the judge said mildly. Let's test this ring against your seal. I don't have. Course you do. Every clerk carries his sealing wax. Standard procedure. Cornered. Crowell pulled a stick of red wax from his pocket. His hands shook as he melted it over a candle flame. The wax dripped onto a scrap of paper. Judge Whitcomb pressed the ring into the warm wax. It fit perfectly, the fleur-de-lis appearing in clear detail. Well, the judge said, that settles that. But Pike wasn't ready to surrender. Ring or no ring, this girl's caused nothing but trouble. Ought to be sold south before she stirs up more slaves. She ought to be free, said a clear voice from the stairs. Everyone looked up. A woman descended slowly, her grey hair pinned neatly under a black bonnet. She wore plain brown clothes and carried herself with quiet dignity. Who are you, ma'am? Judge Whitcomb asked. Rebecca Hartwell. I'm a Quaker minister. I've been watching this situation all night. She looked at Lark with kind eyes. Child, I hear you've been following a hymn. Can you sing it for us? Lark nodded. She had been waiting for this moment, without knowing it. Her voice rose clear and true in the stone basement. When the seal and the song come together at last, and the ribbon recalls what was hidden in past, then the door will swing wide and the captive go free. By the grace that was written in love's ancient decree. Silence fell when she finished. Even Pike stood quiet, caught by the power of the melody. That's no slave song. Rebecca Hartwell said, That's a freedom hymn. Someone wrote those words for this very day. Judge Whitcomb nodded slowly. I believe they did. But outside, dogs began to howl. Pike's reinforcements were coming. The baying of hounds echoed across the Price churchyard. Pike smiled, his pale eyes lighting up. That'll be my deputies, with tracking dogs. Dogs. Lark's voice was very small. Moses put his hand on her shoulder. Don't you worry, child. Dogs can be reasoned with, if you know the right tone. We need to get to the courthouse. Judge Whitcomb said, This needs to be settled legal-like, on the record. With Pike's men surrounding us? Thomas shook his head. We'll never make it. Lark closed her eyes and listened to the hymn. The melody had changed again, become more complex. It spoke of water and darkness, of paths that ran beside the river. The creek, she said, behind the church. It runs under the courthouse. There's a tunnel. How could you possibly know that? Thomas asked. The hymn. It's been showing me safe roads all night. Rebecca Hartwell smiled. The Lord works through many voices. I suggest we listen to this one. They climbed the stairs to the main floor of the church. Outside, the dogs sounded closer. Pike went to the window and peered out. 6 men, he said with satisfaction. You folks ain't going nowhere. But Lark was already moving toward the back of the church. She found a small door behind the pulpit that opened onto a covered porch. Beyond the porch, a creek ran dark between mossy banks. This way, she whispered. One by one, they slipped out the back door. The creek was shallow but swift, running over smooth stones. Lark stepped into the water, her bare feet sure on the slippery rocks. Follow the water, she said. It leads to the courthouse basement. Moses helped Aunt Ruth into the creek. Judge Whitcomb hiked up his nightgown and waded in after them. Even Eugenia Harrow lifted her fine dress and stepped into the stream. Behind them, the dogs howled again. Closer now. They'll track us by scent, Thomas warned. Lark knelt by the water and cupped it in her hands. She began to hum a different tune this time, low and resonant. The sound carried over the water like ripples. From the woods around them came answering howls. But these weren't from Pike's dogs. These were wild sounds, fox and wolf and coyote, all giving voice together. My stars, breathed Rebecca Hartwell. She's calling the wild things. The cacophony of howls rose from every direction. Pike's tracking dogs whined in confusion, unable to sort one scent from many. Beautiful, Moses said with a grin. Child's got every creature in the county singing back up. They followed the creek as it curved toward town. Overhead, clouds parted to show the first stars fading before dawn. The water ran clear and cold around their feet. There, Lark pointed ahead. The courthouse basement showed a narrow opening where the creek disappeared under the stone foundation. A tunnel, just as she had promised. How did she know? Thomas murmured. Some hymns, said Rebecca Hartwell, are older than the buildings that try to contain them. The tunnel under the courthouse was narrow and dark. Water ran ankle-deep along the stone floor. Judge Whitcomb led the way with Dr. Leclerc's lantern, the light dancing on wet walls. This goes back to the foundation work, the judge said, built as a storm drain. I'd forgotten it was here. Lark walked behind him, the blue ribbon on her wrist glowing in the lantern light. The hymn in her heart had grown quiet, as if it was holding its breath. Almost there, she said softly. The tunnel ended at an iron grate. Beyond it lay the courthouse basement, rows of shelves filled with legal documents. Judge Whitcomb produced a key from his coat pocket. Advantage of being a judge, he said. I have keys to everything. They emerged into the basement like fish coming up from deep water. Their clothes dripped on the stone floor. Eugenia's silk dress was ruined, but she didn't seem to care. Now what? Thomas asked. Now we gather all the evidence, Judge Whitcomb said. Every forged paper, every false seal, and we make this legal once and for all. Lark led them to the red door where they had found the ledger. She knelt beside it and began to hum again. The melody pointed to other hiding places, a loose stone in the wall, a hollowed book on the shelf, a box tucked behind the water pipes. More ledgers, Moses said, pulling books from each hiding spot. Looks like Pike and Kroll been busy for years. Judge Whitcomb studied the documents. Fraud, forgery, theft. Enough here to put them both away for a long time. But we still need to make the manumission legal, Rebecca Hartwell reminded them. Right. The judge looked at Lark. Child, do you understand what's about to happen? Yes, sir. I'm about to be free. More than that, once this is on the books, you'll be a citizen. You'll have rights, responsibilities too. Lark touched the blue ribbon. I understand. Then let's go upstairs and make it official. They climbed the narrow stairs to the main courthouse. Dawn light streamed through tall windows, turning the dust motes into gold. Judge Whitcomb went to his desk and pulled out a large leather book. The official record, he said. Every legal transaction in this county goes in here. He dipped his pen in ink. Lark, what's your full name? She hesitated. Slaves didn't usually have last names. Lark Bellamy, Thomas said quietly. She's been part of our family all her life. Let her carry the name with honor. Judge Whitcomb wrote carefully. On this first day of December, in the year of our Lord 1858, the girl child called Lark Bellamy is hereby declared free, according to the manumission written by Marcus Bellamy and witnessed by the undersigned. He signed his name with a flourish. There, legal and binding. Outside, dogs howled again. Pike was still searching. We need witnesses, the judge said. As many as possible. Rebecca Hartwell nodded. I'll ring the church bells. Folks will come running. And, when they get here, Lark said, I want to sing them the whole hymn, all the verses, from beginning to end. Why? Because the hymn isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's been waiting for freedom. The song needs to be sung complete. Judge Whitcomb smiled. Then we'll give you the courthouse steps for a stage. As Rebecca Hartwell hurried off to ring the bells, Lark felt the hymn rising in her chest like sunrise. The time for hiding was over. The time for singing had come. The church bells rang across the sleeping town. Bronze voices calling the faithful to witness something that had never been seen before. A slave girl standing free on the courthouse steps, a song of liberty rising from her throat. People came from every direction. Shopkeepers in their nightclothes, farmers from the outskirts, families with children rubbing sleep from their eyes. They gathered in the grey dawn light, their breath steaming in the cold air. Pike and his men emerged from the woods, their dogs trailing behind them. The tracking hounds looked confused and tired. Pike's face was dark with anger. What's all this? He demanded. Judge Whitcomb stood on the courthouse steps, the official record book in his hands. Legal proceeding, Asa. Official business. What kind of legal proceeding? Manumission, the freeing of a slave according to law. Pike spat. Ain't no slaves getting freed today, not while I'm around. But the crowd had grown large. Nearly 100 people now filled the courthouse square. They listened with quiet attention as Judge Whitcomb read from the record book. Be it known that Lark Bellamy, having reached her 12th birthday and the conditions of her grandfather's will having been met, is hereby declared a free citizen of this county. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some voices sounded pleased, others doubtful. Prove it, Pike shouted. Show us these so-called conditions. Lark stepped forward. She held the signet ring in one hand, the manumission paper in the other. Her voice carried clear in the morning air. The first condition was the ring. She held it up so the crowd could see. My grandfather's signet, found where he left it in trust. She pressed the ring to the red wax of Crowell's seal. The impression was perfect. The second condition was the witness. She nodded to Judge Whitcomb. A man of law to read the paper and make it official. But there's a third condition, she continued. One that's not written in the paper but sewn into the hymn itself. What condition? Called someone from the crowd. Lark looked out at all the faces watching her. Young and old, rich and poor, some kind and some hard. All waiting. The condition that the freedom be shared, that the song not be sung for just one person, but for everyone who needs to hear it. She began to sing. Her voice rose pure and strong in the cold air. When the seal and the song come together at last, and the ribbon recalls what was hidden in past, then the door will swing wide and the captive go free, by the grace that was written in love's ancient decree. New verses came, flowing from her heart like water from a spring. Every chain has its weakness, every lock has its key, every soul has a birthright to stand up and be free. What was stolen by hatred, love will restore. What was lost in the darkness, light will explore. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even Pike's men stood listening, their hands fallen from their weapons. But Pike himself pushed forward, his face twisted with rage. Enough of this nonsense. He reached for Lark's arm, meaning to drag her away. But before he could touch her, Eugenia Harrow stepped between them. "You will not lay hands on this child," she said firmly. "She saved my life. I won't see her harmed. I've got legal authority." "No," said Judge Whitcomb. "You have forged papers and a reputation for fraud. That's what you have." Pike's hand went to his pistol. "Maybe so, but I've got this too." The pistol gleamed dull silver in Pike's hand. The crowd stepped back, fear rippling through the ranks. But Lark didn't move. She stood on the courthouse steps like a small pillar of calm. "You going to shoot a child in front of all these witnesses?" Thomas asked quietly. "If I have to? And then what? You think these folks will just go home and forget what they saw?" Pike's eyes darted around the crowd. More people had arrived, drawn by the church bells and the unusual commotion. Word was spreading that something important was happening at the courthouse. Dr. Leclerc pushed through the crowd, his black bag in his hand. "Asa, you're not well. Put the gun down." "I'm fine." "No, you're not. I've been watching you for months, drinking too much, sleeping too little. Your hands shake when you think nobody's looking." Pike's gun hand did indeed tremble slightly. "Shut up, Doc. You need help, not more trouble. Put the weapon down and let's talk this through." But Pike was beyond reasoning. His finger tightened on the trigger. That's when Lark began to hum. The sound was low and wordless, but it carried something more than music. It held the memory of every lullaby ever sung to a frightened child, every hymn ever raised in hope, every song ever hummed while doing hard work with love. The hum seemed to reach into Pike's chest and find the part of him that was still human. His gun hand wavered. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "Reminding you," Lark said softly, "reminding you what it feels like to be at peace." She hummed a few more bars. The melody was simple, but it held layers of meaning. It spoke of rest after labor, of safety after fear, of forgiveness after anger. Pike's gun lowered. His face crumpled like a child's. "I'm so tired," he said. Dr. Leclerc stepped forward slowly and took the pistol from Pike's slack fingers. "I know you are, Asa. Come on. Let's get you some help." He led Pike away through the crowd, one arm around the broken man's shoulders. The crisis was over. Judge Whitcomb cleared his throat. "Now then, where were we?" He turned to a fresh page in the record book. "I need several witnesses to sign this manumission, people of good standing in the community." Hands went up throughout the crowd. "Dr." Leclerc returned without Pike and signed first. Eugenia Harrow signed second, Rebecca Hartwell third. "I'd like to sign too," said a voice from the back. The crowd parted to reveal a tall man in a black coat. He walked with dignity despite the early hour and the unusual circumstances. "Reverend Morrison," Judge Whitcomb said with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." "A child's freedom is worth losing sleep over," the minister said. "I'd be honored to witness this moment." He signed the book with careful strokes. Other names followed: the schoolteacher, the blacksmith, the woman who ran the general store. When it was done, Judge Whitcomb blotted the ink carefully. "There, Lark Bellamy is officially a free citizen of this county." Applause began slowly, then built like a wave. People clapped and cheered, some wiping tears from their eyes. But Lark held up her hand for quiet. "There's one more thing," she said. "The hymn has a final verse, for everyone who helped tonight." She sang once more, her voice floating over the crowd like a benediction. "What was sown in the darkness will bloom in the light. What was whispered in secret will shine clear and bright. Every kindness remembered, every mercy shown, plants the seeds of a freedom that love has sown." As the last notes faded, the sun broke through the clouds. Golden light streamed across the courthouse square, turning the faces of the crowd into something beautiful. The long night was over. The day of freedom had begun. By full daylight, the courthouse square buzzed with news of the night's events. People clustered in small groups, talking in low, excited voices. Some had gone home to fetch their families, wanting them to witness history. Jasper Crowell stood in shackles beside the courthouse door. Judge Whitcomb had ordered his arrest the moment Pike was led away. The clerk's thin face was pale, his new clothes wrinkled from a night spent hiding in the woods. "Your Honor," Crowell called out, "I demand a trial. Legal representation. You'll get both," Judge Whitcomb replied calmly. "Right after we sort through all these forged documents you've been peddling." A deputy brought another box of papers from the courthouse basement. Evidence of years of fraud and theft. False debts, forged seals, stolen money. The extent of the corruption was staggering. Thomas stood with Lark on the courthouse steps, watching the proceedings. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we rebuild," Judge Whitcomb said. "Starting with your debts, Thomas, the real ones, not the inflated numbers Pike and Crowell cooked up." He opened one of the true ledgers. "According to this, you owe about half what they claimed, and with the interest they charged illegally, you've actually overpaid by about $200. Thomas blinked. "Overpaid?" "Indeed, the county owes you money." Lark smiled and touched the blue ribbon on her wrist. The hymn in her heart had gone quiet now, like a song that had finally reached its proper ending. Dr. Leclerc approached, carrying his medical bag. "How's Pike?" Judge Whitcomb asked. "Sleeping. I gave him a sedative. When he wakes up, he'll need to face trial too. But I think his troubles go deeper than legal problems." "What do you mean?" "His mind's been affected by drink and guilt. He needs doctoring as much as he needs justice." Eugenia Harrow appeared at Lark's side, her ruined silk dress replaced by a simple brown traveling outfit. "Child, I want you to know if you ever need anything, anything at all, you come to me." "Thank you, ma'am. What will you do now? With your freedom?" Lark looked out at the crowd, then back at Thomas. "Learn to read, I suppose. Really read, not just medicine bottles and ledgers. I want to understand all the words, not just the ones I need for survival. I could arrange for a tutor. That's kind of you, ma'am, but I think Thomas can teach me." "If he's willing." Thomas smiled. "I'd be honored." Rebecca Hartwell joined their little group. "There's something else to consider, child. Your gift, for music, for seeing things others miss, that's rare. It could be put to good use." "How do you mean?" "Other people need freedom too. Other songs need singing. Maybe yours isn't the only hymn waiting to be heard." Lark considered this. She thought of all the faces in the crowd, all the different kinds of hunger she'd seen in their eyes. Some hungry for justice, some for kindness, some just for hope. "Maybe," she said, "when I'm ready, when I know enough words to sing the songs right." A commotion near the courthouse door drew their attention. Pike was being led out in shackles, flanked by two deputies. He walked slowly, his head down, looking every bit the broken man Dr. Leclerc had described. As he passed the group on the steps, he stopped and looked at Lark. His pale eyes were different now, softer, sadder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what I tried to do to you." Lark studied his face for a moment. Then she began to hum just a few bars of a gentle melody, something that spoke of forgiveness and second chances. Pike's shoulders shook. "How can you do that? After everything?" "Because the hymn taught me," Lark said simply. "Hatred just makes more songs that nobody wants to hear." The deputies led Pike away. Judge Whitcomb closed his record book with a satisfied snap. "Well," he said, "I think that concludes our official business, unless anyone has objections to this young lady's freedom." He looked around the crowd. A few faces showed discomfort, but no one spoke up. "Then it's settled. Lark Bellamy is a free citizen of this county, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Applause rippled through the square again. But this time it felt different, not just celebration, but the sound of a community coming together around something bigger than themselves. The Baptist church stood open for the celebration that followed. Women appeared with covered dishes, men brought fiddles and banjos, children ran laughing between the pews. What had started as a legal proceeding was becoming a harvest festival. Lark sat in the front pew, still wearing her simple dress but with the blue ribbon now tied in her hair like a crown. People kept coming up to shake her hand, to hear her hum a few bars of the Freedom Hymn, to ask how she'd known about the tunnel under the courthouse. Just listened, she told each one. Songs teach you things if you listen close enough. Aunt Ruth sat beside her, beaming with pride. Child, you done something today that folks will remember for 50 years. We all did something, Lark corrected. The hymn showed the way, but everybody had to choose to follow it. Moses appeared with 2 plates of food, corn, bread, beans, and sliced ham. Eat up, little bird. Freedom's hungry work. As Lark ate, she watched the celebration swirl around her. Thomas was talking with Judge Whitcomb about rebuilding his farm. Doctor Leclerc was bandaging a child's scraped knee. Eugenia Harrow was teaching a group of ladies a waltz step. But what struck her most was how different everyone looked now. The fear and suspicion that had marked so many faces during the long night had been replaced by something warmer. Not perfect, some people still kept to themselves, still showed wariness, but changed. Penny for your thoughts, Rebecca Hartwell said, sitting down beside Lark. Just thinking how music works, how one song can change the whole sound of a place. Indeed it can. What will you do with that knowledge? Lark touched the blue ribbon in her hair. Learn more songs, I suppose. Find out what other hymns are waiting to be sung. And in the meantime, go home with Thomas. Help him fix up the farm, learn to read properly. Maybe teach other folks the songs I already know. A fiddle started up in the corner, joined by a banjo and a harmonica. Several couples began to dance, their feet keeping time on the wooden floor. Dance, child? Rebecca asked. Lark shook her head. Don't know how. Then it's time you learned. Freedom includes dancing. She took Lark's hand and led her to the open space in front of the altar. The steps were simple, just a country reel, but Lark picked them up quickly. Her natural sense of rhythm served her well. As they danced, others joined in. Soon the entire front of the church was filled with swirling couples. Thomas appeared and claimed a dance with Lark, his face showing a lightness she'd never seen before. Thank you, he said, as they stepped together. For what? For showing me how to be better than I was. The music played on as afternoon sunlight streamed through the church windows. Outside, life in the county was returning to normal. Inside, something new was being born, a community that had looked into its own heart and chosen hope over fear. When the dancing finally ended and folks began to drift toward home, Lark found herself standing in the church doorway, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The blue ribbon fluttered in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the first few notes of a new song beginning to form. The wagon ride home felt different from the night before. This time Lark sat up straight on the seat, not hunched, small and fearful. The blue ribbon in her hair caught the last rays of sunset. Thomas held the reins loosely, letting old Sarah find her own pace down the familiar road. Moses rode beside them on his own horse, humming one of the Freedom Hymn's melodies under his breath. What will you do first? Thomas asked. Tomorrow, I mean. Your first full day as a free person, Lark considered. Help Aunt Ruth with breakfast, I suppose. Same as always. You don't have to, you know. You could do anything you want now. I know, but I like helping in the kitchen. Makes the house feel like home. They passed the torch posts that had seemed so threatening the night before. Now they looked like what they really were, just lights to help travelers find their way. Thomas, Lark said quietly, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you really bring me to that party? Was it just to make Silas angry? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. The wagon wheels creaked over the ruts, and somewhere in the woods an owl called to its mate. Partly, he said finally, but if I'm honest, I think part of me hoped something would happen. Something that would change things. What kind of change? I don't know. I just felt like we were all trapped. You, me, Aunt Ruth, Moses. Like we were living someone else's idea of how things should be. I thought maybe if I shook things up. The hymn was already there, Lark said gently. In the air, waiting to be sung. You just gave it a chance to start, Moses chuckled. Child's got it right. Songs don't come from nothing. They've been waiting in the world for the right voices to find them. They turned into the lane that led to the Bellamy farm. The house sat in a grove of oak trees, light spilling from the kitchen windows. Aunt Ruth had kept supper waiting. As they climbed down from the wagon, Lark felt the rightness of it coming home to familiar walls and familiar faces, but coming as herself, whole and free. "Lark," Thomas said as they walked toward the house, "I want you to know whatever happens, whatever changes come, you'll always have a place here. Not as property, but as family." "I know," she said. "The hymn told me that too." Aunt Ruth appeared in the doorway, her face creased with relief and joy. "Well, look what the good Lord brought home safe." She gathered Lark into a fierce hug that smelled of biscuits and wood smoke and love. Over Ruth's shoulder, Lark could see the kitchen table set for four, as if she had always been expected to take her place there as an equal. "Come on then," Ruth said. "Food's getting cold, and I want to hear every detail of this grand adventure." They sat around the scrubbed wooden table, sharing the simple meal and the extraordinary story. As Lark talked, she found herself humming bits of the Freedom Hymn, weaving the music through her words like golden thread through plain cloth. Outside, night settled over the farm. But inside, in the circle of lamplight, four people who had been strangers to their own hearts just hours before were learning how to be a family. 3 months later, on a warm March morning, Lark sat at the kitchen table with a book open before her. The words came easier now, not just the shapes of letters, but the meanings that flowed between them like music between notes. "In the beginning was the Word," she read aloud, "and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." "Very good," Thomas said from his chair by the window. "Your reading's coming along fine." "It's like learning new verses to a song I already knew," Lark said. "The sense was always there. Now I can see the shape of it too." Aunt Ruth looked up from her mending. "Letter came yesterday. From that Quaker lady, Rebecca Hartwell." She handed Lark an envelope addressed in neat handwriting. Inside, a short note in the same careful script. "Dear Lark, I hope this finds you well and growing in wisdom. I write to tell you of another girl, about your age, who has been singing strange songs in the quarters of a plantation near Richmond. The overseer calls it nonsense, but I think you might recognize the tune. If you're willing, there may be another hymn waiting to be heard. With love and respect, R. Hartwell." Lark folded the letter carefully. Through the kitchen window, she could see Moses working in the garden, preparing the soil for spring planting. The world was turning green again, full of new possibility. "What do you think?" Thomas asked. "I think," Lark said slowly, "that I need to learn a few more songs before I'm ready to teach them." "How many more?" "As many as it takes. The hymn that set me free was just the beginning. There are others out there, waiting for the right voices to find them." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the awakening farm. In her hair, the blue ribbon caught the morning light. Around her wrist, she now wore the signet ring on a thin gold chain, not as a symbol of ownership, but as a reminder of the price of freedom and the responsibility that came with it. "When I'm ready," she said, "I'll go, but not alone. Songs like these need harmony, not just a single voice." Thomas joined her at the window. "How will you know when it's time?" Lark smiled and began to hum. The melody that rose from her throat was new, but built on the foundation of all the hymns that had come before. It spoke of roads that led toward freedom, of voices joining together in hope, of doors that opened when the right key was found. "I'll know," she said simply. "The music will tell me." Outside, a mockingbird landed on the fence post and began to sing not its own song, but an echo of the melody Lark had hummed. One song becoming many, one voice inspiring others to find their own. The Freedom Hymn was spreading, note by note, heart by heart, carried on wings toward places that still waited for liberation. A year later, on the first anniversary of her freedom, Lark stood on the courthouse steps again, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood 3 other young people, 2 girls and a boy, all recently freed by legal proceedings similar to her own. The crowd was larger this year. Word had spread throughout the county and beyond about the Freedom Hymn and the girl who sang it. People had come from as far as Richmond to hear the anniversary celebration. Judge Whitcomb opened the ceremony with a reading from the county records. 12 manumissions have been granted this year, he announced, all following legal procedures that were already in place but had been forgotten or deliberately ignored. Dr. Leclerc stood near the edge of the crowd, his medical bag in his hand. He'd been busier than ever lately, as freed slaves needed documentation of their health and age for legal purposes. His back room had become a refuge for those seeking education as well as medicine. "The children would like to sing," Rebecca Hartwell called out. Lark stepped forward. She wore a new dress, blue as her ribbon made by the wife of the freed blacksmith. Her hair was neatly braided, the original blue ribbon woven through it like a thread of memory. "A year ago," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the square, "I thought freedom was something that happened to you, something you waited for and hoped for but couldn't make happen yourself." She looked out at the faces, watching her, young and old, black and white, some still suspicious, but many warm with recognition and support. "But I learned that freedom is something you do, something you choose, every day, in how you treat other people and how you listen for the songs that want to be sung." She nodded to her companions. Together, they began to sing not just the original freedom hymn, but new verses that had grown from it. Songs about learning to read, about earning wages, about children going to school. Songs about former masters who had chosen friendship over ownership, and communities that had chosen justice over tradition. The harmony was complex but clear, 4 voices weaving together like streams joining a river. In the crowd, other voices began to join in, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Thomas stood with Aunt Ruth and Moses, all 3 of them singing along. The past year had changed them too. The farm was smaller now but more prosperous, worked by hired hands who took pride in their labor. The kitchen table had expanded to seat 8, as other freed people had found temporary shelter there while building their own homes. As the song reached its crescendo, Lark felt the music lift beyond the courthouse square, carried on the wind toward places where other voices waited to be heard. The freedom hymn was no longer hers alone, it belonged to anyone with courage enough to sing it. When the last note faded, applause thundered across the square. But more than applause, there was something else in the air, a sense of possibility, of doors opening that had been closed for too long. Judge Whitcomb stepped forward. "Is there anything else?" Lark smiled. "Just this next year, we won't need a special day for freedom songs. They'll be part of every day, sung in kitchens and churches and fields and schoolhouses. Freedom isn't something you celebrate once a year. It's something you live every morning when you wake up and choose how to use your voice." She walked down the courthouse steps, through the crowd of friends and neighbors, toward the wagon where her family waited. The blue ribbon fluttered in her hair, and somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird picked up the melody and carried it toward the horizon. Evening found Lark on the farmhouse porch, a book in her lap and the blue ribbon in her hands. She was untying it from her wrist, preparing to retie it in her hair for the night, when Thomas joined her. "Good day?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Very good." Mary finished reading her first whole book today, and Samuel wrote his name without any help. Mary and Samuel were 2 of the freed children who came to the farm each afternoon for lessons. Lark had discovered that teaching others helped her own learning. Each question they asked made her understand the material more deeply. "You're becoming quite the school teacher." "I'm becoming what I need to become," she said simply. "The hymn keeps showing me new verses." The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. In the distance, they could hear Moses singing as he brought the cows in from pasture, his deep voice carrying an old spiritual that sounded both mournful and hopeful. "Letter came today," Thomas said, "from Rebecca Hartwell." He handed her an envelope, thick with papers. Inside, Lark found not just a letter but a map and what looked like official documents. "She wants me to go to Philadelphia," Lark said, reading quickly. "There's a school there for freed slaves. They want teachers who understand both music and law. What do you think?" Lark looked out at the fields where she'd worked as a slave, the kitchen where she'd first heard Moses teach her the hymn, the road that had carried her toward freedom. Everything that had made her who she was lived in this place. "I think," she said slowly, "that roots are important, but so are wings." She stood and walked to the porch railing. The blue ribbon caught the last rays of sunlight, still bright after all these months. "I'll go, but not forever. There are songs here that still need singing, and I want to be part of that music." Thomas nodded. "When?" "Fall, after harvest. That gives me time to find someone else to teach the children while I'm gone, and time to learn all the verses I'll need for the bigger songs waiting up north." As if summoned by her words, a mockingbird landed on the porch railing and began to sing. Its song was complex, layered not just mimicry of other birds, but something new woven from all the sounds it had heard. Lark listened carefully, then began to hum along. The bird cocked its head, adjusted its tune to match hers. Together, they created a duet that was neither human song nor bird song, but something entirely new. "That's what freedom sounds like," she said when the bird flew away. "Not one voice singing alone, but all voices finding harmony." She tied the blue ribbon in her hair and picked up her book. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new students, new verses to learn and teach. But tonight, in the peace of the porch and the company of family, she was exactly where she needed to be. The hymn that had carried her from slavery to freedom was still singing in her heart, but it had grown beyond her own story. It had become the soundtrack to a larger transformation, a melody that would outlast any single voice that carried it. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Lark opened her book and read by lamplight, preparing for all the songs that waited to be sung. The blue ribbon caught the last light of day, turning the wax seal the color of a warm, living heart, and in that light, all things became possible.